Every day, something dramatic happens in the Caribbean that affects our lives. We'll give you the details. We'll give you the facts on Caribbean Perspective with Eddie Frederick. Here's Eddie Frederick.
So glad you can join us. Over 1 million COVID-19 vaccines for Trinidad and Tobago. This story takes the lead in our 1057th edition of Caribbean Perspective for Friday, 26th February 2021. Details after this break.
Did you know that your friends and family can now shop at the Food Fair from anywhere in the world? And you can receive here in Grenada? The Food Fair and GrenadaMarket.com now make it possible through secure online shopping and personalized customer service. Simply send your loved ones a list of your preferred items or let them fill an online basket and the items will be available for pickup or delivery. Visit GrenadaMarket.com or thefoodfair.gd today for more details. The new norm. Spread the news.
Welcome back. Through the various mechanisms Trinidad and Tobago government is pursuing, Trinidad and Tobago will receive over 1 million COVID vaccines over the next several months. This from Minister of CARICOM and Foreign Affairs Dr. Amory Brown, who says a number of those may very well come through direct arrangements with India. TV6's Renessa Cutting reports.
In a matter of weeks, this country will receive its first allocation of vaccines through the COVAX facility.
COVAX is covering 33% of our population overall, which will give us 923,340. Out of the 33%, they have agreed for 2021 to attempt to give each member state 20% of the allocation, which is 559,600. Of that first 559,600, we are supposedly expecting anywhere between 100 to 118, 120,000 doses as our first tranche of the 20%.
We're also expecting a shipment of 200,000 vaccines through the African Union. The minister is dispelling any suggestion that this country is discriminating against doing business with companies out of India, noting that it was only the 15th of this month that the Serum Institute of India received WHO approval for one of its vaccines, named Covishield.
Unfortunately, the response from them, the private sector entity, was that the Serum Institute is not in a position to accept any further orders for vaccine at this time. The government of India has indicated to us that they will take all available measures, quote unquote, they will go the extra mile in an effort to secure the provision of Covishield vaccines for Trinidad and Tobago.
The minister would like to make it clear that TNT has never had an offer of free vaccines from India, as was the case with Barbados, which donated 2,000 of the vaccines they received from India to this country. But he would not state definitively whether TNT will give vaccines back to Barbados or any other country when we receive more vaccines.
Nothing is currently off the table or has been ruled out. Trinidad and Tobago will continue its strong record and history of generosity to the rest of CARICOM and other countries.
According to UNESCO, 150 countries in the world are yet to receive a single dose of COVID vaccine, with smaller nations in particular being overlooked. But the minister says this country is being very proactive in its approach.
We are talking about the order of over 1 million vaccines over the next weeks and months, and during the course of 2021, that we are arranging to receive in this country.
Renessa Cutting, TV6 News.
All confidentiality out of the window. Government is finally coming out boldly to state why Patriotic was not approved to acquire the assets of the Point-a-Pierre Refinery. According to P&M Deputy Political Leader Fitzgerald Hines, it's simple. They did not have the money. Renessa Cutting again has some details.
This is deep pocket business. Gas and oil is big money business. You have to have money.
So you're saying that over the heads of oil workers?
That's why they joined with an international partner. That's why they went to Credit Suisse to borrow money. This is big money business. I'm not saying it's
so
over
you have
the
no
head,
place in that?
But I'm not saying that.
Cockroach have no place in
I'm
core
not
business.
saying that.
Despite their initial offer of US $700 million upfront, despite the fact that government voluntarily eased up the requirements for them, Patriotic simply did not have the money. This is the account of Deputy Political Leader of the PNM, Fitzgerald Hines.
Patriotic is talking to Credit Suisse to get money borrowed to purchase the refinery, about 500 million. Another 500 million, which they say they have already secured to repair and start up. And then we haven't yet spoken about the operating cost. Up to that time, they did not and were not in a position to say to the government, we have 500 million on the table. And that's what flopped it. Because he didn't tell you that. What they came with was an indicative proposal about what we could do and what we would do if you give us these non-transferable, tradable shares, these transferable tradable shares, tax credits.
Hines is also flatly denying a claim by Patriotic that government is unable to sell the assets due to a lien on the properties.
If you want to buy this for $500, forget 500 US million, $500, but you want to buy it from me, but your boss, she has a lien on this for $300. It means that when you produce the 500 that you're paying for this, she gets 3 in order to release the lien, and I get the balance. But all you pay is still 500.
Hines notes that since government exited the refining business to focus solely on exploration and production, TNT's accounts have been in the black.
So the government was holding up Petrotrin. Today, Heritage in 2019 declared $1.4 billion in profits. Had we gone into the arrangement they wanted us to, we would have been going into the same commitment to the taxpayer on the bias, on the side, on the slide, through a back door. We did not want to commit the taxpayer like that.
Vanessa Cutting, TV6 News.
You're listening to Caribbean Perspective with Eddie Frederick.
In other news, former head of the Financial Services Regulatory Commission in Antigua and Barbuda, Leroy King, has been sentenced to 10 years in prison in the United States. The 74-year-old of Dickinson Bay, Antigua, was sentenced in a Texas court on Wednesday for his role in connection with a $7 billion Ponzi scheme involving the Stanford International Bank. He had pleaded guilty on January 30th, 2020 to 1 count of conspiracy to obstruct justice and 1 count of obstruction of justice for his role in obstructing the Securities and Exchange Commission investigation into the SIB. King admitted that Stanford's cash payments to him totaled approximately $520,963.87 over the course of the conspiracy. Stanford also provided King tickets to the Super Bowls in 2004 and 2006. King had later denied the SEC's request for help with the investigation into R. Allen Stanford and Stanford Financial Group. The U.S. Justice Department has thanked the government of Antigua and Barbuda for its cooperation and assistance. Over in St. Lucia, the Prime Minister there, Alan Chastanet, claims the U.S. $30 million loan from the International Development Association, the IDA, is not a new borrowing. Gina Felipe of HTS News Force reports.
Prime Minister Alan Chastanet says the government had stated its intentions to borrow the U.S. $30 million from the International Development Association in its 2020-2021 budget. Some have questioned the level of borrowing during a pandemic and the impact on debt. The government on Tuesday sought parliamentary authorization in the House of Assembly to borrow US $30 million from the International Development Association to finance the COVID-19 response, recovery, and resilience development policy program. Chastanet says the government was awaiting approval from the World Bank before it went to Parliament.
The $30 million from the World Bank was identified from day one. So when we presented the budget last year, we identified several sources for monies. CDB was one of them. The Taiwanese $20 million repurposing of the loan, the rapid response facility from the IMF, and the $30 million, which was the IDA repurposing loan. So this is no new borrowing. You know, this is not like the government's coming after the fact to borrow money. These were monies that were identified very clearly in my budget presentation earlier in the year. And what we're doing is executing it. So we had to wait for the World Bank board approval before we could come back to Parliament to seek Parliament's approval. But certainly identified as a source of funding that had already been identified. This is not any new additional borrowing above and beyond what we had.
Chasney says the loan will help make up for the shortfall in revenue caused by the pandemic.
We knew and had anticipated that there would be a significant revenue shortfall based on COVID, which there was. We had projected that tourism revenue would be down 50%. To date, that's exactly what the number has been. And also, we knew that we would have the additional expenses. And sadly, coming out of Christmas and New Year's with the spike in cases, that has now cost us additional revenues. We've had to go back and reopen a couple of the hotels. We've had to, the testing has gone, through the roof, and the operations at Victoria Hospital. So all of these are coming with additional expenses.
Meanwhile, First Deputy Leader of the Opposition St. Lucia Labour Party, Castries South MP Dr. Ernest Hilaire, is optimistic that some of the US $30 million will be allocated for income support.
I am hoping that the government does allocate a substantial part for that. I wouldn't be surprised if they do, because the elections is coming. They spent a lot of the money they've borrowed on other things. So finally, you must give the people something. I mean, it would be outrageous if a government does not do that. But again, you never know with this government. They have made it very clear that they do not believe in giving what they see as handouts to people. And it always blows my mind away when they say that in the House, that if you help people who are in need, vulnerable, they are making mendicants of them. But when you give businesses all the concessions and incentives, what are you making out of them? So my thing is, I expect the government to give the people more this time, but I wouldn't be surprised if they don't. And I wouldn't be surprised if they do, because the people are crying, the people are suffering.
The government also sought parliamentary approval to borrow US $7.378 million from the Caribbean Development Bank from its ordinary capital resources. This will also consist of an amount of US $4.178 million from the equity and market resources of the Caribbean Development Bank. Gina Filippi, HTS News Force.
Calling all vehicle owners, inspection and licensing continues, and at Hubbard's we want you to be ready. From February 16th to March 31st, registration numbers 2,501 to 5,000 with single registration letter, or registration numbers 251 to 500 with plural registration letters will receive 11% off new torque tires and PowerMax batteries. Don't get caught unprepared. Visit us today at the Motor Department in Mount Gay or the Tire Bay in Grand Anse near to the building supplies.
I am Eddie Frederick, wishing you a restful weekend. This has been Caribbean Perspective, a whole new approach to highlighting developments in the Caribbean. In the meantime, please continue to log on to CaribbeanPerspective.com for more daily news and more.